Okay, hello everyone. I believe we are now live, live from New York. That's not true at all. Live from all our living rooms. I was meant to play a trailer there. I didn't know how to do it, so the organisers are going to have a word with me. So I'm very sorry. Whoever was sponsoring this, I'm really sorry, but I couldn't find it. So it's a good way to start. This is why you should never get me to mod anything. Anyway. Welcome to another exciting TBRCon panel. I'm very excited to be joined tonight by some amazing authors to discuss what I think is a really topical and quite interesting topic, the role of humour in horror. The role of humour in horror. I feel like we all need a laugh at the moment, and we all like horror, so that's pretty pertinent. So we are live at the moment. So if you're watching live, thank you for watching live. You can comment and you can send us comments. And if I'm a good mod, I will look at these comments and I can bring them up on the screen and we can talk about them. Hopefully I won't forget. Bit about me. I'm Ed. I'm Ed Crocker. Should have said that to start with. I'm a debut author. My book, Lightfall, which is an epic fantasy with vampires and werewolves in, came out last week in North America, which was very exciting. Thanks, guys. Cheers, guys. Horror people are so lovely. It's epic fantasy with vampires and werewolves, and it's first in a trilogy. So if that's your jam, then check it out. It's a bit slow to start, and it gets a little bit better halfway through. But yeah, that's a great selling point, isn't it? So I also review horror and SFF books for FanFiAddict.com, who are the people connected with TBR.com. So it's all a sort of shadowy network connection. That's enough about me. So let's meet our authors. I'm going to go around with you guys. If you could just introduce yourselves briefly. Angela, let's start with you, please.
Hello, I'm Angela Silvaine. I call myself the Cheerful Goth. So this topic is near and dear to my heart. And I am a horror author. I love to write horror comedy and nostalgia. So a lot of my stuff takes place in the 80s and 90s, like Frostbite and Chopping Spree. And I also write sad girl horror. So I write a lot of short stories that are qualified as sad girl horror, which is like the dead spot in my collection there. I live in the Rocky Mountains with my 3 creepy cats, and I'm happy to be here with you.
Thanks, Angela. I love the description of creepy cats. What's the definition of a creepy cat?
All cats.
R.A. Busby, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I too am a fan of horror and comedy, and I love the intersection of the two because they play so well together. And I recently published 2 novellas, specifically "You Will Speak for the Dead," and also "Words Made of Flesh." And I was delighted when people found those both horrifying and funny. So I'm looking forward to discussing this.
Excellent, thank you. Geoffrey, please.
Sure. My name is Geoffrey W. Cole. I go by Jeff. I'm a Canadian. Okay. This is my short story collection, Zebra Meridian. It's sci-fi, fantasy, and horror that are somewhat funny. That seems to be the reception I'm getting from it. I also, R.A. Busby and I were both published by Stellaform, I believe, right?
Yes.
Canadian small press that likes to write about or likes to publish eco-fiction. So sci-fi, fantasy, horror, funny, eco-fiction. Nothing like laughing at the climate crisis, right? That's me.
Well, it's very on trend, humor in horror, laughing at the climate crisis. Quick comment. Someone has said, if I can show that, George Dunn has said, "Words Made of Flesh is quality stuff."
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
You have a bit of a fan there. George is an excellent horror reviewer, actually. He's one of those that has just read every single book ever. So, yeah, you've got a fan there. Can I hide that? Yes, I can. Excellent. I understand technology. Tanya, if you could introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, I'm Tanya Pell. I'm the panel's menace, I think, tonight. I'm
the panel's menace.
Ed has a plan for me if I get out of hand, and then a backup plan. I recently published Cicada, which is my B-movie bug horror set in the American South. And this fall, my gothic novel, Bait and Switch, Her Wicked Roots, comes out with Gallery Simon and Schuster, and another title, redacted as of now, that comes out the following year. So I believe that Her Wicked Roots actually just went live on Goodreads, which is absolutely not comedy horror, but Cicada definitely is, because it is one of my favorite things to write. I love the juxtaposition of adding a little bit of laugh with your slaughters.
Yes, I think we could all agree on that. I can't wait for you to go gothic. I'm really excited to see that. Cicada was brilliant, but obviously not gothic, so I'm very excited for that, I have to say. T Kingfisher, please.
Hey, I'm T Kingfisher. My real name's Ursula Vernon, but I'm a children's book author under that name, so don't confuse the two. It gets messy. Let's see. I don't actually usually call myself a horror fan because I came to it very late in life. My mother was very went through an evangelical phase when I was growing up, and so I did not watch any horror or read any horror. So I discovered it as an adult and was like, oh, okay, but I don't know enough about it to call myself a fan necessarily, despite the fact I've been writing in the genre for years. Go figure. I didn't realize I was writing horror at the time. I feel like, no, this is horrifying. Oh, okay. Let's see. My most, I have no idea what my most recent book was. I'm very sorry. I just moved across the country, and my brain has not snapped back into place yet.
You've written too many. You've written too many.
Well, that's also a problem. What Moves the Dead is probably the one people most likely to know. It's the one with the creepy rabbit on the cover, and the sequel, What Feeds at Night, has a creepy horse on the cover, and the third one will be coming out late this year called What Stalks the Deep, and I don't know what creepy animal will be on the cover.
People do always rave about your creepy covers, I have to say.
It's all the cover artist. Christina Mrazek is amazing. I just look at them and go, oh yeah, that's fantastic.
And I think, is that just Jonathan left? Have I missed anyone out? Nope, we've all said, okay, Jonathan, last but very much not least.
Definitely
Go
least.
for it.
What Stalks the Deep is a great title, by the way. That sounds really cool. So I'm Jonathan Jans, and I most recently, there's a cover over here for Children of the Dark 2. That was my most recent release. And then in the fall, I have a novel from Blackstone, a sci-fi horror novel called Veil, Veil, coming up. And I also, in the fall, have a short story in The End of the World as We Know It, the Stephen King The Stand collection, or the new stories from The Stand. And that'll come out, I think, from Simon & Schuster in August. So that's what I have coming out soon. And hello. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Jonathan. I'm so excited for the Stand collection. It's just that the list of authors on that is just unreal.
It really is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Also, I think they've not left a comment about you, but they're probably thinking it. There's someone watching called Anna Rose Reeds, who's a horror reviewer, who is a massive fan of Children of the Dark. So I know she's geeking out right now. She's like a massive Jonathan Jans fan.
Hello, Anna. Great to see you.
We love Anna.
She's awesome.
Yeah, you know Angela. Yeah, she's awesome, isn't she? Okay, great. So unless I missed anyone out, let's get to the first question. So I want to make clear when I say his first question, because I don't want the entire horror community to send me angry emails, that this is meant to be an obnoxious straw man question, because people do like to post. They get understandably really annoyed when people think this. So I just want to say that so I don't get blacklisted from the horror community. Everyone's thinking, what's he going to say? So the first question for you guys is, if horror is meant to be scary, then why have humor in it at all? If horror is meant to be scary, why have humor in it? Purposely obnoxious straw man argument. I should have had more courage in my convictions and just not justify that and just come out with me. But I'm a coward. Let's start with Tanya. If you could start with that for me, please. What do you think about that?
I think that if you consider how horror is already transgressive and everything, and the level that it takes to maintain horror from beginning to end, sustaining that level of tension can be exhausting. And since we're just throwing out like we want to get blacklisted, we want to start discourse, if you consider the film Skinamarink, which either you loved or you hated, maintaining that kind of tension throughout the entire thing without the audiences needing to pause. Same thing with Hereditary, things of that nature, Incidents Around the House. Horror movie has that wonderful chapter with like 5 minutes of pure unbridled tension where you're just like, Jesus God, when is it gonna happen? You know it's coming.
Walking down the stairs in Barbarian. That was the longest staircase I've ever
liminal
watched.
space. We're just gonna stay in this liminal space forever. So I think if we give that moment of levity, which allows the audience to breathe, the reader to breathe, for us, it actually sets up, it gives us the opportunity, okay, they've let their guard now we can get them. So it's like the perfect instance for a jump scare. Oh, we've got them right where we want them. They've come down, and you enjoy that roller coaster because this is hard to maintain the full way. Even this is hard to maintain, but this we can work with.
Absolutely.
So it's a natural break, because you can't maintain that tension forever. You'd explode.
Yes, it's a semicolon.
I like a semicolon. I love semicolons as well, so that's made me very happy. Jonathan, what do you think about that? Why have humor in horror?
I love what Tanya said. That was excellent. I think that the fact that it is so intense makes it more necessary. I think the more intense something is, the more important it is to have moments of levity. Sorry for quoting Stephen King right off the bat. I'm just going to paraphrase him, but I think it was in Dance Macabre. He said that humans have a biological need to laugh, and if you don't give them the chance to laugh, they're going to laugh when you don't want them to. And I feel like you have to. I mean, I don't think as we're sitting there writing, we're thinking, oh, I'm going to insert a joke here. It just kind of happens naturally, at least for me. But I think that those moments of catharsis not only by contrast make the scarier moments scarier, but as was just said, it makes the audience much more susceptible to the scary thing that's coming because their defenses are down, they are disarmed, and they are about to get hit. Yeah.
I love the sort of aggressive way you ended that. They're disarmed, defenses are down, they're about to get hit. I quite like that idea that you're almost tricking the reader. Just relax, and then boom, terror. I approve your aggression there, Jonathan. R.A. Busby, why humor in horror?
Well, I remember Jordan Peele, who's so good at both of those genres in so many ways. He referred to them, and I hope I'm not misquoting him, sorry if I am, as the conjoined twins of humor and horror. And I love that idea because it suggests that they are two halves of the same whole. I mean, both Tanya and Jonathan talked about the cathartic need for that release of tension, but at a even deeper level, I think that both what they have in common is that they both exist to surprise with something that we don't expect, and we're built up in one particular direction, then we get something very different. And sometimes we're surprised into a jump scare, sometimes we're surprised into a laugh, sometimes both at once. And I think that both have that shock of realization. And then some of the best comedy, like Get Out, for example, I mean, you've got laughter punctuating the horrific points that movie is making. So I think they work really well together.
Yeah, that's such a good example, Get Out, as well, because I think when that's why one of the many reasons that film's great. Because I think when you're a director, I'm not a director, obviously, but I think one of the hardest things to do is in a very sensitive topic like Get Out, convey that humor. And I think that's such a good example of how Jordan Peele just nailed it. Geoffrey, what do you think? Why humor and horror?
I mean, the other panelists have nailed it so far. I like to think of slapstick humor. If you change the soundtrack and the lighting, it's horror, right? The rake scene in The Simpsons where Sideshow Mel just keeps on getting the rake in the face. If you just change, maybe make it black and white, and you change the soundtrack, all of a sudden that's a horror scene, right? So definitely they're two sides of the same coin. But one other great way I think we can use humor in horror, and we're using humor with a U, or with a second U, by the way, the British way and the Canadian way,
British way.
is to really get the reader attached to the characters. When the reader gets to share a moment of humor with the characters, when the characters get to laugh and the reader gets to laugh with them, you love those characters even more. And then when the next horrible thing happens to them, it's that much more devastating. So using humor as a way to connect your reader to the characters, I think, is really powerful to get an attachment with the characters. And yeah, we can talk more about that in a bit, of the different ways humor can be used. But I think that in joke, you're laughing with the characters, is powerful.
Yeah, definitely. And to sort of do a more, I mean, you phrased it really well at the start, to do a sort of more boring version of that, I found a great quote from the writer V.S. Pritchett. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Who said, "Our laughter is only a note or two short of a scream of fear." I really like that. It makes me think of a sort of someone just maniacally laughing, and then it just turns into a scream. Someone can demonstrate that if they want. I don't know. Angela, what do you think?
Well, everyone here is very smart, so they've covered all the good points. But I will say one more thing. I think just like structurally they fit together well, so like, horror is about tension and release, and comedy or humor elements are kind of about setup and punchline. So they share a similar scaffolding. So I think putting them together can be really nice and work kind of naturally. And both two depend on rhythm and pacing. And it's all about exaggeration, right? So both horror and humor are about exaggerated language and situations and characters and actions. So I think they just kind of like RA was saying, they just naturally go together. So it's a good fit.
Yeah, definitely. Have I asked you all that question now? 1, 2, 3.
No.
Oh, I'm going to miss everyone out every single time. Sorry, my brain is a nest of vipers. I'm so sorry. T. Kingfisher, what do you think?
No, it's okay. Well, everybody has covered a lot. I will say that I think it's realistic, if that makes any sense. People under stress make jokes. And the more stress you're under, frequently, the more, sorry, my windows are changing. MASH, that's just nothing but people in a horrible high stress situation, and it's a comedy, and and it's close to horror as you're going to get, I suppose, and because people who are miserable and scared make jokes, and the thing I've always found very unrealistic about many very grimdark things is this isn't funny, and believe me, hang out with EMTs, emergency room nurses, anything like that. They are hilarious.
I love that idea of the stress, the stress angle. I'm also going to embarrass you, T. Kingfisher. I'm very sorry because I've got a quote from yours that just jumped out. It's in a grimdark. I don't have quotes for everyone. It just happened to jump out when I was just doing research. In a grimdark magazine article you did a couple of years ago, you said sometimes humor is inevitable rather than intentional. It's very hard for me to stay serious for a long time. And I just kind of want to open that up to the floor now. I've asked everyone, because what we've not mentioned is the idea that, we talked about, it's like a purposeful thing that authors just sit down and go, well, why do we want humor and horror? But what if, you guys are all quite funny. What if it's just a sort of, sometimes it spills out into the book and you maybe can't control it, and then you write your first draft and you're like, oh wow, that was a bit funnier than I intended. Have any of you ever experienced that, or is that something that rings true?
I can stay serious for about the length of a short story, and it's a strain. I couldn't do it for a whole book, and I have written books where later people will be like, this line is hilarious, and I'm like, okay, I'm glad you think it was. I didn't even think that while I was writing it, but wonderful.
Anyone else?
Well, I think as writers, I think all of us are familiar with being self-deprecating, especially with our humor, which is in itself a form of self-awareness. But when you add, the laughs into it, and we make it funny, and we put it in situations where a character would say this to lighten the mood, what we're essentially doing is putting our mask back on. So I genuinely think that humor is kind of ingrained into us. Like Kingfisher said, this is our natural way to handle the stress of a situation, and everyone's always done that awkward, nervous laugh. We're just looking around to make sure we're just letting other people watch us awkward, nervous laugh.
Yeah.
I think if you meet a writer who is not self-deprecating, you should be very concerned.
Definitely. Ara, you put your hand up before Tanya.
I share that same experience that T. Kingfisher was talking about, where somebody was talking about a specific scene in You Will Speak for the Dead, where I don't want to give any spoilers, but let's say something very, very bad happens to a very private area of the main character's body. And I not sharing some of those same body parts, I was sort of putting myself into that circumstance, and I wrote what I thought would be a pretty natural thing that I might think in a circumstance like that. And I was, to me, it was just a natural thing that one would say. And I was really surprised when a lot of people picked up on that moment and said it was horrific, and it was also really funny. And I was surprised because I hadn't exactly intended it to be funny, just true. So I'm with you all.
I love that, how you were doing your truth and then it was also funny. I really like that idea. And also just what Tanya said about self-deprecating, because I'm the token Brit here. That's my entire mood, just all day long, just constant self-deprecation, making fun of myself. People often think we're putting it on. Sometimes Americans think we're putting it on, but we just do it all day long. We just hate ourselves.
Is it true of Brits, like writers, though, that if I meet a Brit who is not self-deprecating, I should be very suspicious?
Oh yeah, you should be. Yeah, they could be. Like
who are you working for?
Yeah,
they're probably an MP.
Yeah, or an investment bank or something. Oh God, I hope none of you investment banks, so I just insulted. I need to stop making that joke. Okay, cool. Well, so unless anyone else wants to jump in, I'll move on to the second question. So we've got the ground rules in, so we kind of got an idea of why. Actually, no, sorry. One more thing, I completely forgot. No one sort of mentioned, and this kind of comes into a later question, but no one mentioned the idea that humor and horror might have the same purpose in the sense of highlighting sort of very pushing boundaries, to kind of boundary pushing, in the sense that if you watch a stand-up comedian who's trying to be a little bit boundary pushing, it will sometimes have the same effect of horror. What do you, just someone want to jump in? What do you guys think about the sort of, and we'll come on later as if to how you do that, because obviously that's very tricky, but just in terms of whether that's something that rings true to you. Does anyone agree with that?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. I think it's Wes Craven that said, horror doesn't create fear, it releases it. Humor's the same thing. Okay, so it doesn't create the laugh, it releases it. So I think you've got that balance there.
Yeah. I love how you guys are just have so many quotes just in your head. Like horror authors are just like, yeah, Wes Craven, Stephen King just coming out, and I like it.
It
I
was
need
an
to start
open
remembering quotes.
note test, Jonathan, just so you know.
I think that specifically with pushing boundaries, and I'm trying to make it, I think it's easier to do, how do you explain this? I think you can make jokes that are still funny that don't push boundaries, and our brains don't get as bored with that. Whereas horror is a constantly moving horizon. Like it's very hard to once you like. We've all heard a lot of jokes, but we still laugh at things. Like like a good knock joke will still crack me up. It has to be pretty good, but. Whereas once you've seen enough horror, you're just like, okay, okay, all right, okay, that was not transgressive, it was annoying. So I think horror is harder than humor, or at least has a much farther horizon to get to push the boundary now. I don't know what that says about our brains.
Many things, I suspect.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we've established the ground rules then, why we might have humor and horror. What I'm interested now is just to kind of zoom in on your own personal writing, your own personal way that you write humor and horror. How do you approach humor in your own writing? What do you use it for, and why do you like using it? Let's start with R.A. Busby, please.
Oh, in some ways, I feel like I answered the question before, because to me, I don't necessarily start off being with an intention of, okay, well, it's getting really tense here, so I'm going to have a character crack a joke. Although, that's I usually just have a tendency to say, what bring it to bring things down to the boringly real and quotidian, and of if there's a lot of blood on the floor, to think, oh, do I have enough rags, or are they in the hamper? And I don't, and to me, it's not necessarily intentional. It's just, again, being realistic in the moment. But I think that helps ground the horror in the real and make it more horrible by being more woven into the fabric of everyday life, and hampers and towels and things like that.
That's interesting. And just, I mean, you write quite a bit of body horror. Do you think humor is something that works quite? Do you have a specific way that you try and insert humor into that, or is that just something that comes naturally when you're writing body horror?
I think it comes naturally, because bodies are horrible, as we know, and they always betray us one way or another. Usually when we don't want to. And I think that that moment of punctuation where you can either just be miserable about it, or you can laugh at it. I think that made it a natural meeting of the minds, as it were.
Definitely. Angela, what's your sort of? I mean, I'll cheekily insert a sub question to that, because you write a bit of nostalgia, what I call sort of nostalgia horror. Frostbite. Is it Frostbite?
Yeah.
I have read it. I've just forgotten the title because I have terrible memory. So that's kind of like 90s nostalgia. Yep. And then Chopping Spree.
Yep.
Is 80s, like, but in modern times 80s, right? So I'd say what you're going to say, but also a little asterisk. Do you think, when you're sort of writing nostalgia, do you think that's a great example to try and get a bit of humor in? Because, like, those of us like me, I was born in the late 80s. I'm a 90s kid, growing up in the 90s. So I almost laugh when I see 90s references in a good way. I'm like, this is quite funny.
Yeah, for sure. I think writing nostalgia, which, by the way, I also call it nostalgia, not historic or historical. I will not.
Nailed it.
I will not think of the 80s and 90s as historical fiction. But yes, I think setting absolutely lends itself to horror comedy in that example, because like, you know, when you think of the 80s, you kind of have natural sort of funny references, like everything is neon and aerobics and LA gear and Pop-Tarts. But then on the horror side of things, you have like Iran-Contra and the AIDS epidemic. So it's kind of a perfect representation of horror comedy, because it's like on the surface, it's fun, but underneath there's like this dark underbelly. And so I think that nostalgic setting actually plays really nicely with horror and humor, because you engage a reader who wants to be nostalgic and feel good about something that's meaningful to them, but then you're almost like tempting them in with the fun stuff and then hitting them with things that are maybe dark and disturbing that they didn't expect. So yeah, I think it works really well. I purposely use it in that way when I set things in the 80s and 90s. Yeah.
Cool. And once again, tempt them in and then hit them. It's like Jonathan's violent language. I'm really enjoying. We're all so violent as horror authors. I love it. Geoffrey, same question to you. How do you approach humor? And forgive me, because forgive me if I'm wrong, and you've written loads of horror before, but you're predominantly a sci-fi author. Is that right?
I'm a little bit of everything. A lot of my sci-fi tends to be on the darker end of the spectrum with lots of jokes. So yeah, I would say that's probably more sci-fi, but I definitely, especially all of my current stuff seems to be like all the novel work I'm doing right now is all in the horror realm. But I think where I most identify in the horror realm is with things like Army of Darkness, Metalocalypse, like the definitely the funny horror. And I'm not going for, you know, the kind of the slapstick side of things that you'd see in that kind of horror. But the jokes just end up in my, not necessarily even the jokes either. It's real people are ridiculous sometimes. And I think making people like, let them be ridiculous, let them make dumb decisions, let them be petty, and also, you know, really care about each other, but in dumb ways, and do dumb things for each other. Like that's how we get attached to our characters. So when this collection came out, like when I was working through, I didn't expect it to be billed as humor being a big part of it. And that's really, I think, what's kind of caught on as, you know, that's been the selling feature is it's science fiction, fantasy, and horror, but it is also funny. So I don't intentionally go for it, but that's just where I kind of end up as well. I think, as RA said, like, bodies are horrible, but bodies are also really funny and dumb, you know, and terrible, dumb things happen to them. I'm also I know RPGs are part of this convention. So I'm a game master. I've been running games for years, and like horror comedy tends to be where a lot of those games live. Like we did a campaign, multi-year campaign that was Ravenloft with jokes, you know, and it's just it was great fun. So yeah, I think for me it's just kind of naturally where I like to sit in. When things get dark, I also like them to get funny.
That's a good mantra. The reason I asked you about sci-fi, just a little follow-up, I'm really interested because you write a bit of sci-fi as well.
Yeah.
Is it harder to be funny when you're doing sci-fi horror? Because some sci-fi is often associated with hard sci-fi, which is very serious sort of concepts. I know we've obviously got the kind of more modern kind of Becky Chambers style, which is more sort of less hard sci-fi. Do you think because you've got to get all these concepts in, is it harder to be funny, or is that just rubbish?
I don't know. I think it's fine. Like, robots are funny. Just, you know, even when they're doing horrible things, they're kind of funny. Like, somebody built this and it's doing something terrible, but there's somebody who built it. You know, like some dork's like, oh, I gotta go to work tomorrow and build this killer robot. You know, if you start exploring how deep the story goes, you're gonna find really funny stuff in there. So even, you know, like the totalitarian world of 1984, you know, we would experience it much different today if that was written today. But you've got people programming it, and they're complaining, and they're probably putting jokes in their, you know, mind control software, because that's what people do. That's what people have been doing for all time. So I think if you're not putting humor in, then you're not hitting all the right notes. I think it's a big part of being human and needs to be in your writing.
I'd love to see a funny 1984 just sort of set in 2024.
It's called the Ophelia Network by Mur Lafferty.
Nice.
And it's based on because all the official communication channels are controlled. The resistance is hiding things in a Blue's Clues children's show.
Nice.
And yeah,
So cool.
it's
Mur's so good. She's amazing. Yeah.
That's a great
one
concept.
for your TB. Yeah, that's one for your TBR viewers. Jot that down. Jonathan, I sort of feel I know your approach to humor a bit because I've read your books, or Children of the Dark. But tell us about how you approach humor in your writing.
I think some of the adjectives I've heard are really apt. I've heard like natural. I think I've heard organic, and I would add to that, which goes along with those adjectives, I would add unforced. And I think that in general, when you write, I think that you need to be as vulnerable as possible, as naked on the page as you can be. And like when we are with other people, but like I'm a teacher, so I'm with students all day, and I'm myself, but I'm a very different version of myself than I am when I write. When I write, it's a much more unvarnished version of me. And so it's kind of about being honest. And so I guess whatever twisted aspects of my psyche are in existence end up manifesting on the page. And I think it's born of situation, it's born of character, like the characters that you write, but then it's filtered through your lens. And when you're really vulnerable, that kind of unforced organic humor is just going to happen. And I also find I find there to be a correlation, like, and again, it sounds, I think, counterintuitive to maybe people who don't write, but I think that everybody on this panel will I mean, maybe you won't agree, but I think you'll probably agree. But I feel like the worse the situation, maybe the more humor can be born, the more humor can arise. I mean, T Kingfisher were talking about like EMTs and all that stuff, emergency room people. Like I don't know that I've had, because I've had a lot of characters go through a lot of things, but in that story for that anthology, in the Stephen King anthology, my character goes through like 10 kinds of hell. And just the backdrop is the end of the world. Like everybody is dying of the super flu. And so the situation could not be worse. And I've found it to be, for me, one of maybe my funniest story at times, precisely because it's so terrible, because what's happening is so terrible. And the humor that comes out arises so organically from this awful situation and this particular character who's been through so much. So that's that, I guess.
Can you, just for the fans watching, can you tell us anything about your story in the stand, or is it still hush hush?
Yeah, no, it is a character who has lost everything, and he is forced. Well, somebody tries to force him to take care of an animal. It's a rare exotic pet. It's actually, I think I've said this before, like on one panel somewhere, so it's not really a secret. And it's every time I say this, people like turn and they're like, "Did he just say something really inappropriate?" And I promise you, I'm not. But the animal is a dick. All right. Some of you know what that is, right? Have you heard of a dick? Okay.
Small antelope, yeah.
A little tiny, a little baby antelope. It's like 10 pounds. They're tiny and they're so sweet and cute and beautiful. Anyway, that is what my main character, somebody tries to get him to take care of that. And that's the opening of the story. But yeah, I mean, I think that that's enough.
Nice. I can't wait for that. T Kingfisher, what's your sort of personal approach to humor? And also, because you write in different genres as well, in other personas, children's literature, fantasy. So, sub question: does your approach to humor differ? Obviously, content wise, I hope, children's literature. But do you find yourself being the same kind of funny person across your genres, or do you sort of end up different?
Frequently, it's I think it's the same kind of funny. People often say that my main characters are often extremely practical, and I don't mean to be, but it's like the if there's blood everywhere, do I have enough rags to clean this up kind of thing. And I think that there's a certain practical element there. Also, I have this thing where I am perhaps a trifle neurodivergent, and I will start something that it seems like a very logical chain of events, and like, okay, well, if this happens, then this has to happen, then this has to happen, and then you wind up somewhere like a little weird, and I'm like, but you can see all the steps how I got there logically, and my readers will be like, yes, it all made sense and it all hung together. Which is like where in What Moves the Dead, the narrator is staying with his friends who are in fact the ushers, because it's a retelling of the fall of the House of Usher, and they have no money and the house is falling apart, and Madeline is clearly ill, and so the narrator's like, all right, these people need food. It's really hard to get people to take charity. I have to go find a way to get food. I'm going to go hunting. There are no deer here, so I'm going to shoot one of the farmer's cows and then have to pay for it and then bring the cow back and be like, so funny story, I made this horrible mistake and thought this was a deer, now we have to eat it. And I'm like, see, this was an entirely logical progression of thoughts. And you're like, no, not for other people, it's not. I'm like, okay, well, made sense in my head. So I think a lot of it arises just from following things to a logical extreme, being like, you're probably wondering how I got here, but that's also I come up with a lot of monsters, though, is I sit down, I'm like, let me come up, okay, well, this would have to happen, this would have to happen, this would have to happen. All right. Wow, that is horrifying. Cool.
I love that. Sometimes I wish we could just have a documentary where we just follow writers as they're kind of going down these sort of trains of thought. Although I don't know if it would be that interesting, actually, so maybe can that.
There would be a lot of us sitting in our room staring at the ceiling, you know,
Flowchart.
or in the shower. The shower is where I think of everything.
Walking my dog.
Yeah.
It would be the most boring documentary ever. I can't believe I said that. That's the worst idea ever. If anyone's
I
listening,
don't know. You got the shower. It's horror only, fans. That will pay for the next StokerCon.
Yeah. Hopefully. Tanya, cicada is genuinely, even though I always forget how to pronounce it, I keep calling it cicada.
Right. You did it right.
Okay, great. I started calling it cicada, but that was months ago. Now I know how to pronounce it. It's hilarious. What's your sort of approach to your own humor in your writing?
Survival. So I think what Jonathan said about it being organic, when we react to those situations or to any situation that is not funny with humor, that's a learned behavior. And I'll go back to, what we had all been talking about earlier. It's the self-deprecation is a form of self-awareness, but we try to mask that. And sometimes we mask that with hubris and sarcasm. And I mean, like, trying to think of someone that I love, a Trevor Belmont character. Someone that is just with a tortured backstory or countless traumas, but approaches everything with, it could be worse. So with Cicada, which is set on I-22 in the American South, and if you've not been there, it's where all the bodies are buried. Okay, and deep in Mississippi, they're all there. So
you don't even have to bury them in Mississippi. You can go 10 feet off the road and drop it, and it's done.
Yeah. I-22, there's nothing. There's a gas station and a Cracker Barrel, and for 2 hours, you got nothing after that. So where could I set this? Well, cicada would obviously, where could you hide a giant cicada? Mississippi. Where would it be reasonable to have a cult like follow? Mississippi. And for the main character, who is Ash, and who reacts to everything, including her gaslighting boyfriend with Lord Energy, who reacts to everything with this kind of like gallows humor. So for me, it was just the way I react to things. Feel like, well, I guess, but when you taking that humor into a real life situation, into a real life horror situation, and without giving really any spoilers for the book, there's a situation where she has to walk away from the body that has tried to kill her. And every horror movie ever, the girl walks away from the body. No, you go back to the body and you finish it off. You make sure it's not getting up again. Okay?
Always
so
double tap.
Always double tap. This is Mississippi. So I think that when you have that kind of learned behavior that we all have, and that self-deprecating humor, it just kind of comes naturally to us, to these high tense situations. That could be funny.
And it is, without giving anything away, that sort of first few pages of Cicada, where she's just trapped and it's so hot in this car, and she's just beginning to realize, what a dick her boyfriend is. It's just so relatable. And yeah, it's just very funny. Okay, I don't think I've missed anyone out this time. No, excellent. So unless anyone else wants to jump in, the next question is I'm quite interested to see what you guys say about this. Jonathan, you'll have to think on your feet. I apologize. So beyond your own writing, can you think of another author's use of humor that works so well, and why is that so effective for you? I'll go with you, RA, because you immediately put your hand up, so I know you've got one.
Okay, I immediately, when I saw that question, flashed on what I think is one of the most perfect lines that I've ever read in a horror novel that brings together that horror and comedy, and it's so perfect that I'm sure that the author thought for a minute of, is this too on the nose? And I'm talking about that scene in the last scene of Ira Levin's Rosemary's Baby, where she's, and spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't read this novel since 1960, or if you've had time, but she comes upon this baby.
We'll get emails.
Sorry. She comes upon this baby that's her baby, and yet she realizes, looking down into this cradle, that it's the child of Satan, and she's in a satanic cult. And she looks at its eyes, and I don't think Levin gives us like a direct description of what they look like. And in the film, we do not see the eyes, which I think is a great idea. And one of the, and she retreats in horror, her hands clasped to her mouth, and she exclaims about that. And one of the characters, one of the old people in the sort of cult thing, says he has his father's eyes, and it's like, oh my God, that's perfect and funny and horrifying, because he does, and oh my God, and I love that fusion of those two things.
That's awesome. I need to watch Rosemary's Baby again. I love that film. I've not seen it for years and years. It's such a good film. T. Kingfisher, what author, I should say, jumps out at you as a very effective use of horror?
Well,
not horror, humor.
Yeah, I was going to say, oh crap, now I'm stuck. But not usually considered a horror author, but Terry Pratchett, who was hilarious on every level, could make you swallow the most unbelievable things because they were funny. Like Hogfather is one of the great books of all time, and like the premise is somebody's killing Santa Claus using the tooth fairy, and like that is an objectively absurd premise for a book, and it's so brilliant and touching and says so much about humans and myth making. It's like the humor was kind of, you know, the spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. It's like, but he could get you to believe all of these things because there would be all this sort of piercing humanity in the middle of the funny bits. And I think that's just a great example of what humor can do to get away with. And often some very horrible things would happen. Like, you know, it'd be like, okay, there's an Inquisition and they're killing lots and lots and lots of people. This is very bad. And there's a scene in Small Gods, which is one of my favorites, where yes, the very, you know, intense religion has showed up and is going to slaughter the equivalent of Greece, and they drag someone in who's sort of a Galileo stand-in, and they're like, you know, okay, recant, you know, what you've said. You know, the church is demanding you recant. And it's a clear map to that scene, and the guy's like, okay, what do you want me to say? You like, you want it to be a turtle? Turtles are great, very, very dynamic shaped turtles. And they're like, it just like grinds everything to a halt because it is not, you know, proceeding along the right lines. Yeah, I think absolutely stellar use of it. I wish he'd written horror, but I don't think I could have handled it.
Pratchett horror would have been incredible.
Oh, yeah.
I'm so glad you mentioned Pratchett because he's one of my heroes. So I think he's one of the finest examples of, like you said, how humor and humanity can go together. Fun fact: you've ever read the Discworld novel, The Fifth Elephant? That's one of the later ones. It's got vampires and werewolves kind of just being political in it, and that's the reason I wrote my debut fantasy that's just come out with epic fantasy with vampires and werewolves, because I was just copying that book. I love that book so much. I just thought I'm just going to do a worse version of that book. So yeah, he's just self-deprecating Brit there again. So yeah, he's a god. Tanya, do you have someone you want to talk about?
Yeah, I've got a couple. The first one that kind of comes to mind is Edgar Quintero and Meddling Kids, which is essentially if the Scooby-Doo gang had grown up and they all had PTSD and cursed like sailors. And I just giggled my way through that. So I think one of my favorite parts is actually in the first few chapters where one of the characters, Andy, is in a bar fight and she's narrating the fight as it goes on. She's like this because, and if you think about how well that was done, if for those people that have read it, is if you grew up, I'm always stomaching. I gesticulate, I'm a Southerner. If you grew up watching Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Or Scooby-Doo and the 13 Ghosts, or Scooby-Doo and Zombie Island, what in God's name happened to these children when they became adults? Like, they were constantly being traumatized. And so this examines what would have happened, what they would have done with that. And some of them, you know, obviously can't let it go. Some of them are in therapy. Some of them have anger issues.
I think that's Paul Tremblay's next book, isn't it?
And then you add, what if one of the horrors was real and Lovecraftian and there was a cult? And it's gorgeous. And then you have Rachel Harrison and her such sharp teeth, which the title alone is kind of like poking fun at what happens later. So this girl, Rory, is not only sarcastic, put you in your place, and cutting. That's before the werewolf problem. And all of this to mask this vulnerability, all this use of sarcasm, the way we do it is a way for us to mask vulnerability. And what is horror if not ultimately like the pure vulnerability? Like you're being attacked and beset upon all the time.
Definitely. And just say, when you mentioned Rachel Harrison, such sharp teeth, comments blew up. Anna saying, I love that book. And George saying, what a novel. We got some Rachel
So
Harrison
good.
fans in the chat. Okay, cool. Jeffrey, do you have an author you want to talk about who uses humor in horror or other genres very, very
Sure.
effectively?
First off, gallows humor. We've mentioned it a few times, but there's a reason that's a term. I think, Jonathan, you were talking about, the tenser it gets, the more opportunities for humor there are. And it reminded me of that Coen Brothers Western where, they're at the gallows and they're having the nooses put around their neck. And he says, oh, first time?
First
To the
time.
guy beside him, right? Great. So the Tamsin Muir and her Gideon the Ninth is the first book in the series. Just adored it. So this is lesbian necromancers in space, I think, is the quickest description. But it's so much more than that, and it's so funny. It's very much science fiction, very much horror. It kind of it lives in the world I love to live in, and kind of all that crossover. It's about this a galactic empire run by necromancers, and it's also kind of Hogwarts. It's about these juvenile or soon to be uber necromancers all going to a haunted house to learn how to become uber necromancers, and it's horrifying. It's really funny and just so good, and I think more people should read it. I see lots of heads nodding.
So good.
Yeah. And another one, this is an oldie, and Galapagos by Vonnegut. It's a very much it's a pandemic novel. It's an end of the world plague novel. It's amazingly funny. It's narrated by a man. I think he dies. I don't think he dies in the pandemic, but he dies early in the story, and he doesn't go into the light. And so he's condemned to stay on Earth for 1 million years until he gets another chance to go into the light. So it's narrated by this ghost who gets to watch humanity's evolution after the pandemic for that 1 million years. And the device is great. And it's full of those moments of what humanity evolves into is very horrifying and very funny. And I highly recommend it. Oldie but a goodie.
Yeah, I saw lots of people nodding with Tamsin Muir, the Locked Tomb series. I love hearing people describe that because it's such a wild description. Like, yep, necromancers going into a haunted house. I love that series so much. And also, have you ever seen people cosplaying that series?
Oh, I'd love to. It'd
It's
be amazing.
wild. You should Google pictures of people doing that. They're super fans, put it that way. Cool. Angela, what author do you want to talk about?
I think one of my recent favorites is Brian McCulley. He has a series called The Candy Cane Kills and Candy Cane Kills Again. It's holiday horror comedy. And it's so funny as far as dialogue and props and using of the Christmas setting. But the context is it's about a family who's kind of going through some stuff. The parents aren't getting along. They've got a lot of drama in their family, and they rent a house in the mountains to go for a Christmas vacation in like an out of the way snowy spot, which we all know is a recipe for disaster. And this essentially new slasher arises named Candy Cane. So it's just a great play on a slasher, but it's very heartfelt and, really truly about family dynamics and kind of what this family is going through and how they rise to the occasion for each other. And the sequel is actually extremely surprising. It went all kinds of places I did not expect and handled slashers in a totally interesting way. And then I also mentioned, I think one of the most kind of fun things about it from a humor and nostalgia perspective is the use of Christmas and religious objects for gore. You've got Christmas ornaments and candy canes and all kinds of fun stuff. So that one is a great time.
Genuinely so happy you mentioned Brian. I love what he's doing with slashers at the moment. He's so good. He's so good, isn't he? And obviously we can't really talk about without giving away, but what he does in the sequel to Candy Cane, I just did not see it coming. And he I was like, you can't get away with that, and he gets away with it. It's so good. Yeah, and again, the chat blew up for Brian. We got Anna saying iconic. he's already iconic apparently. Go on, Brian. And he plays guitar and and sings. Some people are too talented.
Triple threat.
So I'm sure you guys do that as well. So I'm just complimenting Brian. And just you probably all you're all equally talented. I do nothing. I don't play an instrument. I'm terrible.
And he can pull off a print.
What's that?
He can pull off a printed shirt.
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
guys,
I agree. I love how we're all just stalking him on social media. Well, you probably met him actually. Have you met him, Tanya?
Oh yeah, several times. And Candy Cane is in the same series as Cicada and
Shortwave, of course.
Yeah.
Shortwave press. Yeah. Okay.
the Killer VHS.
Right, let's stop Brian out. Now, he's probably not even watching. He'll never know. We just talked about him.
We love you, Brian.
Jonathan, I've left you to last because you didn't get the questions in advance because you are surprise, awesome guest star. So you've doing that thing that I hate thinking on my feet. So I'm so sorry I did this to you. But have you thought of an author?
I have, and just full disclosure, because you were so nice, I realized earlier today, maybe right before the show, like I'm a teacher, as I mentioned, and there's no excuse, but it's been a really busy year, and I don't think I responded to confirm. I saw my name on the graphic. I'm like, okay, so I'm in it, right? But I didn't realize there was an email that I was supposed to respond to too. So there's a reason I didn't get the questions is because I didn't respond, and that's on me, not on you. So I like how you're like running interference for me, but it's completely my fault that I didn't have the questions beforehand. So
Jonathan, just to say, like, you just turning up unannounced was honestly one of the best things that's ever happened to me. Like, you just popped up and I love your writing. And you just popped up and I was like, what the fuck? And it's a very cool moment. So you don't need to apologize at all.
Oh wait, Jonathan. No, okay. So I'm not going to talk about this one, but the quintessential example of humor and horror for me is It by Stephen King. I just think that 1,100-page book is filled with both of those things, and sometimes simultaneously. But the author that I think I'd rather talk about, because I talk about Stephen King all the time, is Caroline Kepnes. And not everybody considers her horror, probably. I do. I think especially a book called Providence, which nobody seems to talk about, at least not lately. Incredible book with so much humor in it, so much heart, and some horror as well. So Providence, amazing book, probably my favorite book by her. But the one that everybody will probably know who's watching this, at least they're familiar with the show, is You, the series called YOU, where Joe Goldberg, I think, is the name of the protagonist. And it's a little bit like it's written completely differently, but it reminds me a little bit of Patrick Bateman in American Psycho, in that this is not a character that we should like. This is not a character for whom we should ever root. His behavior is objectively awful. Yet Caroline's voice and her humor is baked into that. But her voice, her humor is just so engaging and compelling that we're swept along with Joe's shenanigans. And we end up, like, at times kind of rooting for him, but then feeling horrible about ourselves for doing so. Or maybe not rooting for him, but not necessarily wanting him to be caught for things that he absolutely objectively deserves to be caught and punished for. But because of the way she writes the character, because of her voice, because she's freaking hilarious. Like, Caroline is so funny, just naturally unforced hilarity that you just can't help but go along with it. And so I feel like I've read the first 3 U books, I believe, and they're all just marvelous. And I think that humor in those books is as important as any other element.
Awesome. And when you mentioned Providence, George in the chat said Providence is a masterpiece.
It is. It is a total it should be canon. Like, it's so good. One of my favorite books of the past decade. Like, I just love Providence. And what I also love about it, this is slightly off script, but I have no script because I didn't respond to the email, so I don't deserve a script. But it is also narratively bold. I love it when And I mean, like, whatever. It depends on the book, right? Not every book has to do this, but I love that she like completely. It's like Psycho. I don't want to ruin Psycho. We talked about Rosemary's Baby. Obviously, that's the statute of limitations for spoilers, right? Like, I don't know if you can. I think that was completely in your right to like spoil a 1967 book or whatever that was. So Psycho, I'll just say in that vein that there's a major plot twist about halfway through, right? But Robert Bloch had guts to do what he did, like to completely transform the narrative of that book to go off in a different direction with a different character. Caroline does some similar things in Providence. So like on every level, that book is just rocking. So good.
Awesome. Another TBR shout there. So viewers, jot it down. Again, it's actually quite annoying because I'm maxed out on the books I need to read, and I'm getting all these other recommendations. So thanks, guys. Okay, cool. Unless anyone else wants to jump in with actually, I'll say one myself. Why not? I thought of one in case someone did a tricky turn it around on me, but you're very nice, so you didn't do that. But my shout. Do you guys know Christopher Bjorman?
Oh, love him.
Yeah, he's
so good.
So he's branched out into fantasy now. His last 2 books, but he did about 5 horrors before that, and he's just so. I mean, like very when he's serious, but his humor. The book called Between Two Fires, just sort of plague. Yeah, something like 14th century plague France. And it's so grim. It's so grim, but it's just the dialogue and the idea, like we said earlier, the idea of putting that ultra grimness against the absurdity of it all, almost the existential horrificness of his situation of just demons and horrible creatures in this plague, the plague plus demons. It's like couldn't get any worse, and it's somehow still funny. I mean, Black Tongue Thief is fantasy, not horror, but that's one of the funniest books I've ever read.
It's hilarious.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that would be my shout. If anyone's watching, please go and read Black Tongue Thief and Between Two Fires. Okay, cool. So next question. I'm looking forward to your answers on this. If anyone's going to challenge me on this. So my question is, why are we seeing a golden age of comedy? And again, if it's sorry, not comedy, humor in horror. And again, you can challenge me on that. I feel like this isn't the golden age of humor in horror. Feel free to challenge me. But if we are seeing a bit of a golden age of humor in horror media, do you think that's connected to the idea that we're in the meta age of horror, the sort of self-referential kind of age at the moment? Do you think that's increasing the humor that we're finding in horror? Or is there another reason that it feels like there's more humor in horror? But if you want to challenge me on that, please go ahead. T. Kingfisher, if you wouldn't mind starting.
I think the meta thing, I feel like hits a lot more in horror movies than I've seen it necessarily in horror novels. But the problem is that my TBR pile is also gigantic, so it's entirely possible that there's a golden age of humor in horror going on right now, and I will catch up to it in about 2 years. Because like I think I read Gideon the Ninth like a year and a half after it came out, and I was like, hey, did you guys know this is a great book? And everyone's like, yes, we knew that. Yes. So I don't know if we're in a golden age or if there's a lot of it now or not. The last trend in horror that I recognized was that everyone was writing fungus books for some reason. So you got me.
They still are.
I wrote mine. Somebody else can take it from
now. Jonathan, what do you think? Do you feel like there's more humor in horror? And if so, do you think there's a reason for that?
I actually am still thinking about the question. I saw RA raise your hand. Do you mind?
Oh, it was only to indicate that I too am a member of the fungus horror community.
Man, I'm hey, from the governor. Oh, okay.
I'll help you out.
Yeah, come back to me.
I think it's so recently I was on a panel of grief horror, and we talked about how we have the rise in the last couple of years of grief horror and trauma horror. And we discussed the same thing. Is that even a thing? And is it actually having a renaissance, or has it always been here? But I think it's the same thing as humor in horror, is we're all having a collective kind of a moment of cognitive empathy. So, and whereas grief horror, when you're reading grief horror, and I know I've written grief horror, Angela has, we probably all have touched upon it at some point. When you're writing grief horror, you're going through that, or when you're reading it, you're going through that with almost like your inner child. Whereas humor horror, you're going through that with like your best friend. So it's, I think in that situation, and again, what we're really finding is that we aren't alone. So other people have had this happen. Other people are experiencing this, and other people react the same way. So I think it's a sense of community, and I think that's what we're seeing with the horror renaissance in general.
That's interesting. And do you think that in the world, I'll just put up this comment to sort of show you what I mean. Elenia said, the more aggravating real world events are, the more dark comedy hits, in my opinion. So do you think that that's why we need community more than ever, because of real world events?
I think if you just get on Blue Sky for 5 seconds and look at how many of us are sharing, or we have been sharing for the last, let's just say 8 years for reasons, the gif of the dog with the coffee cup and the room is on fire. This is fine. We're all just passing that around. So our Venn diagram of horror has become a circle. So I think that, yeah, if we're all trying our best just to make it through, and sometimes all we can do is laugh at it because the horrors are real, and yet we are persisting.
And I think there's also an element of the bit where we are all where we're under stress, so we make more jokes. I was in Barcelona in early November, and I did, I think, a version of this panel, in fact, and they were like, so, I was just like, look, I'm going to be hilarious for the next 4 years. And,
It's a way to cope. It's a way to cope.
Yeah.
It's actually a healthy way to cope. They did a study that people who survived concentration camps, and I realize this is a horrible, dark thing, but the ones who lived through it were the ones with senses of humor, had like a much higher chance of getting out, of alive. So go figure.
Yeah, I've completely forgotten the title, annoyingly, but there is a book about concentration camps, and it's by a psychiatrist, I think, or psychologist. I always get those terms mixed up because I'm stupid. And they basically make that point that basically the people who survived, one of the characteristics they had was that ability to do that. So that's really interesting. R.A. Busby, what do you think? Do you think there's something in that idea of the world at the moment?
Well, something that T. Kingfisher just said reminded me of one of the purposes of comedy that I remember Aristotle saying in the Poetics, which is that one of the big purposes of comedy in general is to mock those in power, to point out that the emperor really does have no clothes and maybe he should put them on because we're not liking what we're seeing, and to and expose the foibles of society, the injustices of that we endure, or to other people that they inflict. And I think both horror and comedy work together to do exactly that. Like, hey, things are horrible. Look, I'm going to show you. And hey, things are horrible. And now let's laugh at them because that brings them down to size. I think that's why satire and comedy is so effective as well.
Yeah, people keep saying that satire is dead because some of the events in the world have become so ridiculous, but it keeps finding a way to survive, I think.
The Onion has on several occasions, the Onion has just posted on like Twitter or Blue Sky, "We give up."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I felt like when a certain tech giant did a certain certain kind of salute the other day, I felt like that was when it was just time to give up. Eleni has said, sorry, not Eleni. Anna has given a TBR rec after listening to that conversation. I've got Victorian Psycho by Virginia. Pronunciation is a Fito. I'm so sorry. She's watching. She's probably not watching. On my mind, it's coming out soon, and I'm bullying everyone to read it to share that specific brand of dark humor that we need in these times. Angela's nodding.
It's on my TV. It's really great.
Is it? Yeah, I'd still have a review today, and I really want to read it as well. And Eleni has also said the horror. I've forgotten who said it, but the horrors are real, and yet we are persisting. Deserves to go on a T-shirt. So well done, whoever said it. And Anna then said, "We laugh so we don't cry."
That's right.
Exactly.
Or
Angela,
both. Why not both?
Yeah, both.
Yeah,
both at once.
Angela, what do you think?
The other thing that comes to mind listening to everyone talk about it is kind of getting back a little bit to your point of meta horror and meta horror comedy. I think I have seen more of a rise of that recently. And I think it kind of goes back to community. You know, we were talking about how when things are bad in the world, we all kind of crave and need a sense of community even more. And I think of meta horror as kind of all being in on the joke. We all know the rules, and we're acknowledging we know the rules, and we exist within this system together. So I think I'll use a movie as an example, but like Cabin in the Woods would be a good one, where it's all about the structure of a horror movie and all these rules which are being used against us, and we have no choice but to kind of comply with them and play along. And even when we don't, they're going to cheat and make us play along anyway. That feels a little bit like what living in the world is today. We all see the structure. We have seen the puppeteers. We know they're there.
Yes.
But all of us know they're there. So at least we can laugh at the joke together and say, we get it. So I think maybe that's part of that meta horror thing and why it works too.
I'm so glad you mentioned Cabin in the Woods, because that's one of my favorite horror films. And I feel like that's a film that just gets more and more important every year. Because like you say, it's the idea of the puppeteers, the idea of sort of turning the focus back on the people watching the film. And I feel as things disintegrate and the sort of the violence within us starts to come out again, I keep watching that and I just think, oh wow, this film's getting a bit too close for comfort, but also absolutely hilarious film.
But hopefully we're all smoking the weed that will inoculate us to their lives. So
yes, that's the answer. Yeah. Okay.
I'll just moved to New Mexico where it's legal. It's North Carolina. God, I'm glad I did.
The whole country's legal where I am.
Yeah. Just to hold the mountain, all the mountain states.
But you're going to be the 51st state.
I don't think so.
Geoffrey, what do you think?
See, John,
first of all, we would be the 51st through 60th states, because we're a bunch of states as well, and it would be the end of the Republican Party, because that's a lot of senators. Yeah, but anyway, so first of all, I'm surrounded by like so many smart, articulate people. Like there's been Aristotle quotes, wonderful dissections of the modern zeitgeist. I'm also crumbling under the weight of the climate crisis and our, gross inaction, and it's crippling sometimes. And so I'm like, fuck, I do want to write about it. And I do write about the climate crisis, but also sometimes I need to write about like dumb werewolves fighting rock stars and make myself laugh. And you know what? That's also climate fiction. If you look under the surface, that's still climate fiction. But sometimes you do need a place to breathe and to be able to let go of the horrors that, like the climate crisis is so horrifying. I read, climate crisis book about what the Earth might look like under various warming scenarios. That's the scariest book I've ever read in my life. And I've read a ton of scary books, right? And it put me in a 18-month-long funk. But writing is how I'm sure many of us process our feelings, and putting, diving into the humor in the horror, I think is a way to deal with it. I think I'm getting a little bit far from the question, though. Are we in a golden age of humor and fiction? I think we are in a trough of just comedy. Like there are lots of, there aren't big tentpole comedy movies that I've seen coming out lately. Most of the TV shows we watch are not comedies. That's not how they're billed, even though a lot of the horror, maybe we need to go to these other places to find our laughs now, because comedy as a genre isn't. I don't think it's doing as well as many of the other genres. And maybe, the next 4 years we'll see a resurgence in that, because what else do we have? But I think there might be something to be said for, maybe comedy as a genre isn't pulling its weight. So the rest of the genres need to, or have the opportunity to, bring more people into that community. And I think humor is a great way to do that.
Interesting. Jonathan, you said come back to you, so I'm honoring your wish. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't know about the golden age thing. I don't know. But what I do think is that this is more just an observation rather than answering the question. But I feel like, as I'm listening to everybody talk, I'm kind of searching through my own feelings here like a Jedi. And I really feel like what appeals to me, and a story can be fun, silly, whatever, but what appeals to me is that when I sense that somebody, first of all, the stuff that we're all talking about, like we're not talking about explicitly, but we're all alluding to, right? We're alluding to the annexation of Canada. We're alluding to this and this and this. But there's some, and there's some really serious things going on right now, right? And somebody said the last 8 years, and that's, yeah, there's a lot of serious stuff happening. And I think that for me, what's more interesting is when, like, there's this process. You start with something very, very serious, and then you feel earnest about it, right? You're not afraid to show that you care about it, and then from that springs empathy, and then from that place comes whatever story you tend to write. But that empathy, that underbelly of seriousness, I think that's reflected in the approach you take, even if it ends up being funny, silly, whatever. There's this understanding from the reader that this person is not just nonchalantly screwing around. This person actually cares about this. And I don't think those are mutually exclusive at all. Like, I know people who just like want to all the time project this nonchalance. They want to project this unserious attitude, this smart ass kind of thing. And there's nothing wrong with being that way at times in fiction. But when I sense that that's all there is, just that surface that doesn't really care about all these really important things, I'm not as interested. I'm interested when I know that somebody has empathy for the subject, that cares about the subject. And then once I feel that, once I get that vibe, that energy, then I'll go wherever, no matter how wild or funny or whatever it gets, I'm willing to go with it. But I definitely have to sense that acknowledgement of how serious some of these things are. I don't know. That doesn't answer the question at all, but
No,
all talk.
I like it, and in a weird diversion, I sort of feel a bit like that about stand-up comedy at the moment, because traditionally, I quite like dark humor, but I'm finding it a little more difficult just to kind of be like, the very sort of cynical, salty, no empathy kind, which I used to be a bit more liking. I kind of want ones who are still dark humor, but a little more kind of thoughtful at the base, if that makes sense. Maybe I'm just getting soft in my old age. I don't know, but
the name that was on the tip
You
of my
were
tongue-
born in the 80s. Your old age, my ass. Sorry. I apologize.
the name that was on the tip of my tongue that I almost mentioned was Bill Burr, the comedian. And the thing is that he might be one of the most inappropriate comedians working today. Like, there's very little that's sacred. But like, if you've listened to him lately, there's definitely a seriousness there. There's like an acknowledgement of some major problems that are really hurting a lot of people, and that's kind of drawn me to him more, lately, because I don't know, I respond to that.
Cool.
Well, it's funny.
I love how we
going back to Pratchett. You can tell the point at which the series stopped being the light, fun sort of, I'm just going to do a stand-up, a spoof of fantasy novels, to wait, I care very deeply about social injustice and
That's such a good point. That there's a run of Discworld novels sort of towards the end where he starts covering things in the city, Ankh-Morpork, like the establishment of the banks, the establishment of the post office, and he's just kind of going into he's just going into capitalism, and you can see he's really kind of starting to get so much more serious and thinking about it. We've only got someone STC 2003, don't know what that refers to, says Anthony Jeselnik's comedy is a great example of gallows humor. That is very true. Yeah, he does not do what we're just talking about. He's just a villain, but I quite enjoy him, I have to say. We are running out of time a bit. We've got technically 5 minutes left. We can overrun. So we are going to miss out the last 2 questions, sadly. But that's a sign of a good panel, I think, because we were just having a great chat. So I'm going to be a bit cheeky and see if I can squeeze it in, because I want you guys to be able to sell yourselves at the end. Not literally. I mean, sell your books and where we can find you.
The OnlyFans? We're not doing it? Okay.
That would be. Can you imagine? We have a lovely panel and then we just ruin it. I just can't cancel myself by just doing anything.
We could just basically say we're the real horrors between the covers.
Yeah. I like that. So I'm going to be cheeky and try and squeeze in before we do that. If you could be very brief for me. If there's any readers watching who are they're starting off writing and they want a bit of advice about how to be funny in horror, and if nothing comes to mind, just give them a bit of writing advice. I'm sure you've got something stored up. Just a one-line writing advice for anyone who's just starting off in horror, they're writing their first horror book, they're looking at you experts. Have you got a thing you want to say to them, Angela?
Well, what I would say is don't quit, don't give up. Writing is hard. We all have lives. Nice. We have conflicts. A lot of what you do sucks. Just keep writing. I don't really have a humor tip. I think it's hard to tell someone how to be funny. Just embrace your own way that it comes out, basically. Nice.
Don't give up. Geoffrey.
Don't be afraid to be weird. Be specific. Be determined. It's going to suck. What you write is going to suck for the first, while. Don't worry about it. Just keep doing it. And you'll get there. Determination is all of it.
I feel like determination is going to be a theme here. Tanya.
I don't really have specific humor advice because, like I said, it's trauma and that's homegrown. I guess store-bought's fine. No is the worst thing someone's going to say to you. I mean, I guess they could say something worse, but they don't know you, so who cares? Your brain's meaner. So I just shoot your shot. That's my thing. Is always shoot your shot. Finish something and then shoot your shot, preferably. But
going back to OnlyFans again, isn't it? Sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
We broke Donovan. Oh no.
It's 12:30 in Britain. My stupid humor's coming out. Anyway, swiftly moving on to Ari Busby. Have you got any advice?
Honestly, I think that it comes down to tell the truth, and maybe your truth is best expressed through vampires and werewolves and cicadas, but it is your truth, and stick to that and tell that truth, even if, like Geoffrey was saying, it's not perfect. It's not, it's not a polished product, but keep telling it.
Nice. T. Kingfisher, please.
The best piece of overall writing advice I can give is hire an actual entertainment lawyer to go over your contract. Do not let the family lawyer do it. because trust me, the way words are used are very different between the branches. That's the only writing advice I've ever given that I never hear anyone else give. As far as humor goes, look, if you're not funny, don't force it, because then your writing is going to come off like the person who says something they think is funny and no one laughs. So they say it again louder in case no one heard them. Don't do that. Just write what you got, and if it's not hilarious, that's really okay. Maybe that's not you. Just don't force the humor.
Nice. I love the specificity of the first tip. That was good. And last but not least, our surprise guest star, Jonathan. Have you got any writing advice?
Marvelous advice. Trying not to recapitulate what's been said, because it's all been awesome. Obviously, read a lot, write a lot, learn a lot. But as you do all that, make sure you remember to be yourself. And that's what I tell I teach creative writing and advanced creative writing. And it's at the beginning of the semester, we talk about finding our voices, but we also talk about why I don't want them to use AI. It's not like some sort of anti-technology bent that I have. It's because, frankly, I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in you. And the world is interested in you. The world doesn't need to hear you filtered with something else, doesn't need to hear you collaborating with some sort of fake intelligence. The world is more interested in you because only you have lived your life and your experience, and only you have your lens. So be the only thing that you can be. And that's enough. It's enough. You don't need AI. You don't need that kind of crap. Be you, because nobody else can. I know that sounds like a cheesy cat poster, but it's so true. So be yourself.
I love there's an anti-AI bit at the end. I hate AI, so thank you for that. That was awesome. That was some really good advice there. That was really good. So I'm gonna go around and ask you guys just to tell us where we can find you, and if you have a book coming out at the moment, this is your chance to sell yourself, as we said before. Quick note for the authors: I'll end the stream after that, and we go back into the studio and we're not live, so you can, if you want to stick around and just say bye, then I'm just saying that because sometimes on these things people just go and then they say, oh, I didn't get a chance to say bye. But if you want to just leave, you can leave as well. That was a bit of a backstage for the audience, a bit of a backstage information. Let's start with Tanya. Where can we find you? What's coming out? Go for it.
I mean, you can just Google me, but TanyaPell.com. But I'm on the Blue Sky and the Instagram, and that's about it at this point. But TanyaPell.com, I try to keep that updated. Cicada came out this past fall, but again, I said I have Her Wicked Roots comes out with Simon & Schuster in October, I think October 7th, and I think the cover reveal is on Monday, so yay.
Nice.
It's not funny. It's not funny, though. It's gothic. It's not funny.
We're still excited.
Spoilers. So
I'm really looking forward to that, I have to say. Angela, where can we find you? What's happening with you?
You can find me at angelasilvain.com, and that has links to my social medias. I'm mostly active on Instagram and Blue Sky as well. The book I have coming out this year is the sequel to Frostbite, which is a 90s sci-fi horror comedy. It's called The Cold Snap. That will be out in October. So I guess read Frostbite now so you're ready.
This is my ignorance. I didn't realize you had a sequel to Frostbite coming out. That's so cool. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks. I'll have to reread Frostbite because I read it like a year ago, which will be nice. I'm looking forward to that. Geoffrey, you please.
Sure. So my collection, Zebra Meridian, it's came out in the fall. You can pick it up anywhere you pick up books. I'm also on Blue Sky and Instagram. I'm not very active on either, though. But yeah, check me out there, and I'm madly at work on other projects. So hopefully I'll have something else to announce at Blue Sky or Instagram.
Nice. That was a cool cover, by the way, that you showed. Absolutely loving the zebra
big old
stuff.
Zebra butt.
Yeah. Oh, that's what it is. Okay.
With a bit of galaxy, mixed in with the stripes. I was delighted when they produced that. Yeah.
I love that design. All right, Busby.
Pretty much everybody else, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on Instagram, Threads, And I'm if anybody wants to read what I've written, I've published with You Will Speak for the Dead with Stelliform, and Words Made of Flesh from Cemetery Gates Media this year, and I'm really happy about both of those. And so yeah, that's me, and I'll try to follow all of you all. So there we go.
Awesome. I like there's a common theme of Blue Sky and Instagram, which is a very author. I feel like it's a very author thing at the moment. We've all left Twitter and we're not on TikTok. It's just Blue
I'm
Sky.
hanging by a thread on Instagram. I'm like, this is also Zuckerberg's playground. I need to get out of here.
Yeah.
I can't ever find
we're all
anything
the
on
weary.
Instagram.
Yeah, I feel you. T Kingfisher, where can we find you and anything else you want to say?
Let's see. Well, Blue Sky again. The only thing I ever put on my Instagram are pictures of interesting bugs. So
Nice.
I have a website at Red Wombat Studio, which I update every now and again. I think I have 3 books coming out this year. It's possible I have 4. But Sword Heart, which is a fantasy romance that's really funny, comes out like next month. Hemlock and Silver is a fantasy with weird horror elements. It's sort of a Snow White retelling, only it's mostly about poison. And the third Sworn Soldier book, which is What Stalks the Deep, comes out sometime this fall. And then there might be one called Snake Eater, but I don't even remember when that comes out because it's from a different publisher and it's all very confusing. But anyway, yes, go to a bookstore and hopefully I will have a book there. And if not, blame my publisher.
It's also so many books you write. It's brilliant.
I really lack a social life. My idea of fun is video games, Magic the Gathering, and writing books.
Yes.
You are me, I think.
Can we all play Jeff's or can we all play the Ravencroft with jokes? Because I need it.
It's fun.
Before I come to Jonathan, George has just said, final comment, would just like to reaffirm my love for Words Made of Flesh once again. So
thank you, George. Oh my God.
That's nice, isn't it? Real love for that book tonight.
Thank you.
And Jonathan, again, the guest star, last but never least. Go for it.
Always least. I have a website, jonathanjans.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter there. I'm available at the places where others have mentioned as well, the social media outlets. I have a lot of stuff coming out and some stuff that's going to be announced soon. But in the meantime, if you want something quick, just a novella, I would urge you to check out The Dismembered, which I think fits the bill of what we're talking about. Horror, definitely horror, with some humor here and there. Very gothic, and one I'm really
pretty.
What's that?
She's pretty. The cover, she's pretty.
The cover is so pretty. Oh my gosh,
she's pretty.
Matthew Revert. Oh, it's such a lovely cover. Yes. And I'm writing another gothic story now, a novel now, kind of in the same universe. So anyway, just to preemptively be prepared for that, maybe read The Dismembered. So there we go.
Awesome. Anna just said that cover. So that's
yes.
Lots of agreement there. Okay. Double check. I've asked everyone, haven't I? Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
And what about you, Ed?
I was told you had a debut.
It's the most British thing ever. It's like who gives a toss about me? Yeah, sorry, I forgot about myself. Yeah, my debut epic fantasy, the first in a trilogy, came out last week, which was fun, in North America, Canada, and it's going to come out in various other European countries soon, I hope. And it's called Lightfall. It's about epic fantasy with vampires and werewolves in. Basically, I've made them boring, just like political and boring and stuff. So yeah, check that out if that sounds good. And
she pretty.
If you want to... Oh yeah, my cover. Yeah, she is pretty.
She's pretty.
I love my cover. Yeah, I mean, it was very little to do with me, that cover, but yeah, I love it. And the one thing I will say is I don't do much on my website, but I have a newsletter, which I'm going to be evil and sell now, because it's not just news about me, which is obviously a bit boring. I do a roundup of horror and SFF book news and releases in a month. And I do a short story and I do an article and stuff. It's very long, and it's called Get Crocked, because I'm an idiot. My surname's Crocker. It's called Get Crocked. So if you want to sign up to that, it's in the link in my bio in my socials. I'm on Ed Crocker Books on Blue Sky and Instagram again. Ed Crocker Books, and you can also sign up to it on my website, www.ed-crocker.com. But I'm having a lot of fun with that, so please give that a shot. Sorry, that was a terrible sales pitch. The desperation of the author to get people to sign up to their newsletter. And that's me. So it only remains for me to thank all the people watching. Sorry, someone's put cockroaches forever. Yeah, thanks, Josh. That's an in-joke.
There are the puns.
Yeah, we like the puns. Yeah, we are crockheads, crocodiles. It's all coming now. Yeah, okay, I better end it now. Thank you to all the people watching, and to all the people who are watching it back recorded, which there'll be quite a few. I hope you check out all these amazing authors. These guys are awesome, as you have seen. They're so good. There's so much going on in horror, and there's so much to check out. It's such an exciting time in horror. So thank you to TBR.com as well, cool guys at FanFiAddict.com. And this sounds like the Oscars, isn't it? I'll shut up now. And that's it. Thanks, guys, and check in with the other panels in the next couple of days.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye-bye.